Hello, everybody, and welcome to Pocket Coach. In today's experiment, we are going to look at epic initiative estimation. So epics, if you're using SAFe, we're talking about portfolio epics, not the Jira Cloud epics, or initiatives. If you're a Jira Cloud person, you might use the word initiative. So how do you estimate big epics? We have other videos on what is an epic, how to write an epic, but this one is going to just be how do you estimate the big stuff. So problem, we need to be able to estimate epics quickly. And that's something that most of my clients are not able to do and accurately, even though it's quick. So what happens is they go slow because they're worried about accuracy. What we need is something quick and accurate. The hypothesis here is that we can use relative estimation, just like you do stories, relative estimation. A lot of people don't do that very well either, but that same skill of relative estimation would be used on the epic level. Will give us very fast initial estimates, incredibly fast. One of my clients, 98% faster than it used to take them when we did this. And then refine those estimates as we learn, as we build. Okay, so initially very quick, still high quality, and gets better. That's the hypothesis. This is a 9-month or more experiment because you need epics to close in order for you to know if it's working. Your goal is to find out are our estimates have equal quality or not, even though they're so much faster, because that's the promise. Typical outcomes, you should see the decreased time and cost to estimate epics, high-level level 1 estimates by 98% is what we found, while still maintaining the exact same level of accuracy. What do you got to do? Skill growth, right? What do you got to do? Every epic in the portfolio's next 3-year horizon. So you have a portfolio backlog, the ones that are going to hit in the next 3 years, they all have estimates in epic points. Features all have estimates in feature points, and then stories have estimates and story points. You'll see why we have those 3 kinds of points here. You've calculated a magic ratio, a ratio of story point to feature point, right? We'll talk about that as we go deeper. And you have actuals. You know how many points you actually ended up closing for features and epics, because you'll need that as well for this experiment. Okay. And my shirt today, this is incorrect. The shirt today is called the Lofton, and it is an homage to Alfred Hitchcock. The Lofton, Alfred Hitchcock. All right, sorry I did that live. Let's move on. I don't think I spelled that right. I'll get that. Ooh, I'll get that later. Hitch. Oh my goodness. All right, never mind. I got help opening up over here. Let's get into the good stuff. So, estimating epics. That's what I promised. So, there are 3 ways to estimate an epic. Again, we're talking about a portfolio epic from SAFe or an initiative. Number 1 is story point rollup. That's where you decompose every single story for the epic and then roll up the points. That is the slowest, and it's waterfall. Big requirements up front to do that. Relative epic estimation is just which epic is bigger than which epic. We give them a value, and now we know that's a 1, that's a 13, and it's very, very fast. But in order for you to do this, you have to have a history, and not every one of my clients has those histories. We have to fix that. And the third way is the magic number. The magic ratio, actually, is what I call it today. So let me change that for you. That'll hopefully spell correctly. And it's going to improve over time, the magic ratio, as we learn. So in the second 5 minutes, I'll teach you these 3 different techniques. I'll start with one of them right now. But that's the gist of it. There's the 3 ways. I'm just going to show you how, and that'll be the lesson for today, the experiment. Okay, so experiment number 1 is if you do story point rollup. So in this particular case, you break the epic into features. So here in my little tick and scratch drawing, you can see my epic, and I've broken it up into 4 features here, right? You break the features into stories. So I've only broken 1 here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, looks like about 6 stories. You would do that for all the features. So every epic is broken. So epic is broken into all the features. Every feature is broken into its stories. You then would estimate relative estimation, all the stories, and you would add them up. So this 1 feature I did already, 1, 3, 1, 8, 5, 2, you add that up, that's 20. So the story points for this feature would be 20. You would then break down the stories for these 3, add it up. Maybe that one's 10 story points, 46 story points, 35 story points. If you add 35, 46, 10, and 20, you get 111. And so now you have your epic estimate. This epic is 111 story points. So that is the first of the 3 techniques. It's the one that I don't use because it's too waterfall. It's too big requirements up front. It takes way too much time. Okay. It also involves a whole lot of people. And so your cost goes up because of the number of people working on estimation. Okay, So that's the first technique. The second technique is relative epic estimation. It's the fastest, but it does require history. So let's do that one now. So here's an example. First of all, you use an agile relative estimation technique, but at the epic level. So instead of story points, we're going to use something called epic points, brand new idea. Okay. Then you're going to have an historical database, and you'll figure out your average story points, your average costs and time for similar sized epics. And just like that, in just minutes, you can have an estimate range. Okay, so that's my first 5 minutes. I'm going to reset my timer, and we're going to take a look at this second technique and the third technique. Okay, so let's say that you have a new epic, and you look at all your existing epics, and you figure this new one is about the same size as A, B, C, D here. They were all threes. So you have a bunch of size 3 epics. This epic, there's a lot of unknowns still. There's things I'm not sure about, but overall, it looks more like the 3s than it does the 5s or the 2s. So we're going to give it a 3 because it looks like other 3s. That's how fast it is to do that. Okay. Well, we look it up, and our smallest 3 had 50 story points. Our biggest had 180. So if you look here, A, B, C, D, story point actual. This is, so by the way, actual. In other words, the A, B, C, D are closed. These are not epics that are still in progress. A, B, C, and D are completed epics, but we recorded the total story points that were ever attributed to these epics. And those total story points were 50, 120, 150, and 180. So we now have a range. We can say, hey, new epic is going to be between 50 and 180 if history is any indicator. You could take an average of that. I took the mean. So if you look at the mean here, it's about 135 story points. And the E is because this is estimated. These are actuals. This is an estimate. I think it's going to be about 135 story points. And we can keep an eye on that as we actually go and build the epic out. But in just minutes, I can get a story point size on that. Even more exciting, the cost. I actually also recorded the cost and the calendar time for A, B, C, and D. $5.5 thousand, $8,000, or $5.5K, $550,000, $800,000, $700,000. I think that's supposed to be $K. Yeah, 11, 1 point, well, whatever. You get the idea. And then for calendar, 3, 5, 5, 7 months. So again, same thing. I take the mean. This is going to cost somewhere in the order of 7.5, so $750,000, and it's going to take me about 5 months before I see it in production, right? So this is a great technique, but it does require you have history. If you don't have history, you can fudge it by going back to epics that you've done in the past, and just get and give them Fibonacci numbers, look up their costs and times, and create an artificial table. It's a great way to kind of back into it. And if you don't have story point history, well, then you're going to have to wait for a couple of turns of the clock before you can actually start using this technique. All right, so we have story point rollup, and then we have the table technique where you use epic points and then averages. The last technique is the magic number technique, and this is the technique that I advise. Okay, I actually combine it with this technique. I have you do this technique when you have enough data, but I have you use this technique immediately. Okay, so in this case, you're going to break your epic into features. So that's fine. So in other words, going back to this one, this epic had 4 features. You're still going to do that because that's actually pretty quick and easy to do. You're going to relatively estimate features now. So instead of breaking them into stories, you're just going to say, what's my smallest feature, estimate the other features. And then you're going to add up all the feature points, and you'll know your total feature points for that epic. Okay. You'll then break one feature only into stories. You'll estimate those stories, and you will find a story point total for that feature. Now you'll have a ratio of feature points and story points. And since you know the total feature points for the entire epic, and you have a ratio of feature points to story points, simply use your ratio, and you now have a story point estimate for your entire epic. So compare to the relative estimate above. How does that look? You can still do the relative estimation technique here, and compare that. When you do this, did it fall into the 50 to 180, right? It's a great little technique. And then every time you decompose another feature, you're going to update your magic number, your ratio, okay? So I'm going to change that to ratio. You're going to update your magic ratio every time. So here's an example that wasn't necessarily easy to follow. So let's say you have a feature that's 3 feature points. So you break your epic down, and you have an epic that has feature 1 here is 3 feature points, and it has feature 2, 3, 4, 5 points, 1 feature point, 8 feature points, 8 feature points. If you add that all up, maybe you get a total of 20 feature points. Okay, so feature 1 is 3 feature points. and you know that the other, you have, other features, and and you've relatively estimated. So everything's in feature points right now. Again, very quick to do. You decompose just feature one into stories, and you find out that the total of its stories is 30 story points for that feature. Okay, so you have a ratio: 3 feature points, 30 story points. What's the ratio? 10, right? 3 feature points is 30 story points. So 3 divided by 30 divided by 3 here is 10. 10 story points per feature point. Okay. Now, for the other features, you don't decompose those, but we do relative estimate feature to feature. And so we get 3, 5, 8, 8, 1. That's what we see here. So 3 feature point, 5 feature point, 1 feature point, 8, and 8. Notice we have not decomposed these into stories. They are still at the feature point level. Only one is decomposed into stories. So that's very different than the first technique where we had to decompose everything. Okay. Final 5 minutes, and we'll finish out this technique. Start. Okay. I had a feeling this one was going to go long. Okay, so now we add up the 51883, and that comes to 25 total feature points right here. 25 total feature points across all these features. Okay. Well, if it's 25 feature points and our ratio is 10 story points per feature point, you just multiply your 25 feature points times 10, and you will get 250. 25 times 10 is 250, which means this epic is 250 story points for the epic. Got it? So if it's important to you to understand the number of story points per epic, this is a great, fast way to do it. Now, interesting thing. Later, we decompose feature 2 because now we got to get that feature going, right? Well, let's say that feature 2 is 5 feature points. That's what we have here. Feature 2 is 5 feature points, and we decompose it. But when we decompose it, it turns out it's 70 story points. Notice that that's not the ratio that we saw above. The ratio above held, it would have been 50 story points. Where the ratio doesn't constrain us. It was just a piece of data. So now when we break down number 2, the ratio would actually be different. Here's what we do. We just add up our total feature points known. So we had a 3 feature point here, and we had a 5 feature point here. So 3 plus 5. We have now decomposed 8 feature points of our 25 feature points. We have 25 feature points total across all of these, but we've only decomposed F1 and now F2. So we've only decomposed 8 feature points worth of features. These 17 points here, 17 points here, we have not decomposed yet. Okay. We also know the total story points was 30 plus 70 if you look underneath those 2 features. So now you have 8 feature points equals 100 story points. You see what we did there? We combined all the broken down feature points. We combined all the broken down story points, and we get 8 feature points equals 100 story points. So we just do 100 divided by 8, and our new ratio went from 10 story points per feature point to 12.5. Okay. Now we can add that up, multiply that by 25, and instead of our average being 250, our expected story points 250. Now it's 312. So it went up by 62 story points. So if you look back here, that's probably still within your range. So it doesn't matter that it changed by that, because notice our range is 50 to 180. These examples aren't, by the way, meant to be related to each other, but the delta here is usually still within that same tolerance, if you will. And so every time you decompose a new feature, your ratio gets more and more accurate. And so you just come up with a new, and you just keep announcing what that new story points is. So that's a way to quickly figure out your story points per epic. The truth is, you may not ever need that. There are some reasons why you might want to know story points per epic, because you might, for example, you might have figured out your cost per story point or your time per story point. You can do that right from this table with simple math. If you do that, then you say, okay, so what about this epic? This epic is 250 story points, so we can calculate the average amount of dollars or how many calendar months it's going to take to build it. But the truth is, if you use this table here from technique 2, you don't need all that. So lots of ways to cut the estimate here. You can do the hard way, which I don't recommend. You can do this way, but you need history. Until you have the history, you can use this way, and then eventually get your history and settle down into this and get rid of story points altogether. So there you go, folks. That is 3 techniques for how to estimate an epic or a large initiative. I hope you found that interesting, and I hope you try it out on your epics. My name is Anthony Crane, and I will see you on the next video.